Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving break, those of us who are in the United States. And welcome to Slated's weekly film finance Q&A with our EP service team. My name is Greg Gertmanian, and I'll be joined by several members of our EP service team, including Mitchell, our EP services manager, Chris, our coverage supervisor and manager of documentaries, and potentially even Chelsea, our VP of development. We're here every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific to talk about all things related to getting movies made. So that ranges from how to develop a script, how to put a better package together by attracting a producer and director and talent, how to arrange for sales and distribution on your independent film, and of course, how to assemble financing for your indie film project. Our goal in these sessions is to be as helpful as possible to any filmmaker with a question, whether you're brand new to the film industry and you may be approaching your first screenplay, or you've got a bunch of credits under your belt and you're a seasoned investor or producer. There are no dumb questions in this room. So if you do think you might have a question today, the best way to contribute is to go ahead and raise your hand and raise it as early as you like. We usually chat for around 20 to 30 minutes at the top of the room about the goings on in the film industry, at which point we'll start calling people up on stage and inviting you to participate. It's never too soon to raise your hand. Even if you're not sure what your question is, you'll have plenty of time to gather your thoughts before we bring you up on stage. So go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to chat with us, ask a question, or share an experience. If you'd like to speak with us or engage with us today, but you don't want to talk on mic, that's totally fine. You can write your question or comment in the comments section, and we will read it out loud and answer it live, provided that we have time before the room wraps up. All right, we've just had Chelsea, our VP of Development, join us on stage. Hello, Chelsea.
Hello.
And of course, we're joined by Mitchell, our EP Services Manager. Hi, Mitchell.
Hello.
And we may even be blessed with the voice of Chris today if she's in a place to speak. Hi, Chris.
Hello. I like this introduction. Hearing
New
everyone's
format.
voice is nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So topic of conversation for today before we open up the room is there haven't been like major headlines out of the film industry over the past week. The biggest one that I think is worth talking about is happened about 8 days ago, actually, and it was the announcement of Neon's new credit facility, their new $200 million line of credit to expand their operations. This is really relevant for the film industry at large. It's relevant for us, the film community at Slated, and for independent filmmakers everywhere, because Neon is not one of the major studios. They are sort of one of the, I guess you could call them a mini major in the independent film space. They're one of the few companies that is still supporting truly independent voices, one of the few companies that is still acquiring films out of festivals and supporting first-time filmmakers as well. And they're doing it pretty spectacularly. They're considered, I think, one of the most direct competitors to A24, which has raised billions of dollars in capital, and you see them everywhere now. And so they're really a meaningful player, and this $200 million line of credit is going to help them to expand their operations. They're said to be planning to use it on, of course, hiring, but also on marketing, also on more development and acquisitions. Potentially that could mean acquiring screenplays as well, which is a trend we've seen increase in the last couple of months, as well as acquiring finished films and increasing production too. It's no mystery why Neon is getting the extra love from the banks these days. They just had a major hit with Long Legs, which was one of the biggest contributors to the box office this year in the indie film space. And they have the upcoming, or actually I think it's in theaters now, Oscar contender Honora from Sean Baker. So they've really put wins up all over the board, both in terms of their awards contenders and in terms of their commercial hits. They had Babes, the independent romantic comedy, or comedy I should say, which I really enjoyed and strongly recommend, as well as Robot Dreams, which was nominated for an Oscar, the animated film from a couple of years ago. And they have tons of upcoming films, including the sequel to It Follows, They Follow, coming up as well. So lots of really interesting films. You may have seen Long Legs, you may have seen Babes, you may have seen Honora or are looking forward to Honora, but I think more power in the hands of Neon and their executives is certainly going to be of tremendous service to independent filmmakers everywhere. It's one more gate open for you to sell your script and get your independent film acquired by a company that seems to really care about making interesting movies and not just large tentpole, programmers that are going to attract, the biggest, the broadest audiences. So I think that's interesting. I wonder, before we get into any further, shoot off topics, I'd like to invite our panel up here to participate, to weigh in on that. What do you guys think about Neon's expansion of operations? Have you seen Long Legs? Have you seen Robot Dreams? Have you seen Anora? What does this say to you about the types of work that you hope to be supported or the work that Neon is already doing? And I'll invite anyone to come off of mute first.
Yeah, I am really encouraged by it. It's always a great sign when someone outside of the studio system, again, a larger company, but still a company that is supporting kind of smaller films, smaller voices in a relative scale, um, is able to get a little bit more investment, is able to position themselves a little better so that their stories are getting told and getting more eyes and ears out there. I am personally a fan of a lot of their work that they've done. As you mentioned, Anora uh, is something that I saw a couple weeks ago, and I really loved it. Um, Sean Baker is an excellent voice in the independent film community. Um, Beyond that, long legs is also great. And I think that's something that is a strength of Neon's, their ability not just to cater to subsections of the kind of like more independent space. They're not just doing horror. They're not just doing small drama. They're kind of doing stuff across the board. And yeah, I'm optimistic that as the years continue, they'll hopefully be able to continue fleshing out their catalog and expanding their base of operations so we can potentially see them develop a little bit further into something like an A24 or potentially even their own new thing that can really help more filmmakers have access to get their stories told.
Well said. Yeah, I think A24, one distinction really is at the brand level. They've spent so much money on marketing. I've heard executives say in the past that the title card doesn't really matter before a film because it's not a reason that anyone goes to theaters to see a movie. And I heard them use the example of, well, you don't go to a Sony movie just because it's a Sony movie. And I think A24 really sort of designed this new way of being a big presence as a mini major studio, but also in the indie space by pouring so much money into their brand. I think A24 is a brand, at least for me, and I'm curious, Chelsea, Chris, and Mitchell, if you guys feel the same way, but when there is a new A24 movie out, that does mean something, I think, to me, at least as a consumer, about what kind of content that will be. That it's likely to be a film that is pushing the boundaries in some way, is how I see it, either stylistically or in terms of the filmmaker's point of view, or in terms of the way that the genre is, being iterated upon. And Neon, by comparison, I think makes films which are just as good, sometimes potentially better, but maybe they haven't invested so many tens of millions of dollars in the brand awareness the way that A24 has. I wonder how you see that. Maybe Chelsea, if I can come to you, like, do you, as a consumer, do you view those brands differently? Are either of them a draw in and of themselves? And if so, what's the distinction in your eyes?
Yeah, I think you're right. I definitely think that A24 in particular has done like a really good job in building a brand. And I do think that it does affect the way that we sort of consume movies because I think, that while they, like Mitchell said, make many different types of movies, I think like tonally, they have a little bit of a through line and similarities between them all. And sort of feel, I don't know, just like cool, I guess. And they almost feel like, you're really good friends that have good taste that are recommending you really cool, unique films. And so I think that that helps. Yeah, it sort of helps their brand. I think they also, pour a lot of money into marketing and even like their merch style feels very different than a regular studio. I think they sort of have a feeling of like a closer and more intimate relationship with their filmmakers as well. And that can also produce a brand and sort of like conversation around these films that I think is different, at least, and more exciting than what you would normally see around like the promotion of a film. Um, but yeah, I lost the thread of the initial question, but I think, they definitely do seem to have a specific kind of brand and tone across the movies that they put out.
Do you think this is an opportunity for Neon to get a little of that same magic? Do you think they'll need to differentiate themselves? Like, is there room for two cool kids on the block, Chelsea? How do what do you think about that? Is there space for them?
For sure, I think so. I think do I see them as a little different? I think that Mitchell probably said it perfectly. I think they do feel like a little bit more broad than A24. So I think that there's definitely room for that. Even with, I mean, I don't even know if they have handled other of Sean Baker's films, but I feel like Honora has really broken out in a commercial way than many of his films hadn't before. And I don't know if it's to, sort of their doing, or if it's just because he is more of a known kind of filmmaker now and is somebody who is more recognizable. But, for a film that is about a sex worker, um, it feels very broad in terms of its comedy and its reach. So I definitely do think that there is enough space for them both. And I definitely am excited to see what other films they put out.
His previous films were actually A24 films, Florida Project and Red Rocket. So he made the shift, or they made the shift, or who knows what happened there. It seems like he got a bigger budget for Anora, among other things.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I see the acquisition occurred in November of 2023, so a year ago, and I think that Neon may have acquired the North American rights after the film was completed. So there may be an interesting story there. Obviously, we don't know Sean Baker personally, but maybe he felt that Neon's, maybe there was an offer to acquire the film from A24. Maybe he came to them first, but he felt like Neon was going to treat this project a little bit better or give it more of a release, the kind of release that he's looking for. Or potentially A24 has moved on to other types of pictures. They maybe feel that this just wasn't the right film for them. But that's a really good point, Chris. Sean Baker's last films were released by A24, and for those of you who are trying to remember his credits, the Florida Project, as Chris just mentioned, but also Red Rocket from 2021, and then earlier he was sort of the sole filmmaker, or one of the sole filmmakers, on a film called Tangerine, which was shot on an iPhone and produced with another Slated member that is active in the community. So a lot of boundary pushing, interesting work that explores the lives of folks we don't often see get the big screen treatment. Chelsea, are you a Sean Baker fan generally speaking, and have you seen Honora?
Yeah, I am, I would say. I'm not a completist. I don't think I've seen Red Rocket, but I've heard very good things. But I was a huge fan of Honora, loved that very much. I really liked Tangerine. I felt like that was, groundbreaking for its time. I think it was shot like on an iPhone, right? Um, so yeah, I just think that he is a very interesting filmmaker. And I think that Honora is one of his best in terms of the ones that I have seen. Yeah.
So two strong. That's good to know. Two strong recommends from Mitchell and Chelsea for Honora. Chris, have you seen Honora yet? And what do you make of this whole thing? Are these companies? Is there room for two folks? Do you see a distinction between the brand and is this expansion into this sort of mini major indie cool kid film space welcomed?
I mine's a pass on Anora. I give it a half-star review, even though it's such a beautiful film and well executed. But I am not a Sean Baker fan. I'm sorry to say. I have a big problem with his point of view, and I feel like um,
I think we lost Chris. Has Chris cut out for anyone else or just me? Chris, are you there?
there's there's just something off kilter. I'm in a tunnel.
Okay, well, I feel like I got the gist of it. Feel free to cut us off and jump back into the conversation when you're past the tunnels at any point. Just take yourself off of mute and rejoin. But I think that's really interesting. I mean, we have three film executives up on stage who've supported a lot of independent film content, and we have two recommends or even strong recommends and a pass. That is, I think, a testament to the whole methodology that we employ at Slated, which is that stories are always going to be deeply personal. And you could take the three best studio heads or executives or curators of content in the world, they're all going to have a slightly different reaction to each piece of content. So, really, to get a sense of, where a piece of material stands, you have to pull at least three opinions. And in our system, if just one of the three recommends a project, either at the script level or the screening level, that project usually qualifies for matchmaking with investors and distributors and collaborators and all kinds of other action on the Slated platform, even if the other two people, it's not their taste. But in this particular case, a recommend pass profile. Sorry, I'm a bit of a geek here. Probably no one cares.
Maybe a pass was too strong.
It would be a
Because
low skewing consider.
I mean, if I'm thinking of our categories, it would rate highly. It's just in the overall and then the premise is where I would have the problem, because I just think the point of view is off.
Yeah.
And so and I'm just surprised by his films that no one intervenes to weigh in on that. um, so yeah, okay,
Well,
maybe a low consider.
well, I find it fascinating. I mean, look, even if Chris, even if you had been a pass, recommend pass. That's an incredible score. That's in the mid '80s. I think that Moonlight received, which is an A24 movie, their seminal production, received a recommend pass at the script level when we reviewed the screenplay before the film was released. And I think that's a reflection of a perfect reflection of great art and great work, that we're all going to have a different relationship with it. There are films on which we're going to agree, but if you can get just one of three people to have sort of a passionate, supportive response, you're doing something right. So I think this is fascinating, and Chris, I don't know how I feel about. I haven't seen Anora yet. I have seen the Florida Project. There's a lot I love about it, a lot that I feel like could be refined, and yet Tangerine is like one of the it impresses me more than almost any other movie I've seen. I've never seen a film like it. So very interesting. I think Sean Baker, as sort of a case study artist through which to view these different brands, is a perfect one, because his thematic work is in a way unified and in a way checks the boxes for both companies.
I think it might be my documentary background, because I mean, I've heard his films called his approach like an ethnographic approach, but for me it falls short, even though he's portraying a subculture. There's still a sense of observing from the outside, and I feel like we never quite get into the protagonist point of view, and um, so there's part of me where I think, did you do the work? Did you do the actual research and talk to people? Because there's a part missing from just the perspective. So anyway, and regarding Neon and A24, I don't know if this is fair, but my kind of perception is that Neon is more international. I mean, you mentioned Robot Dreams, that's a Spanish film. I'm thinking of the documentary Flea from a few years ago that was a Danish film, I think. Um, and I feel like even though A24 has a film by Paolo Sorrentino now, and I feel like there's a bit more of an American flavor to the films versus Neon's catalog is a bit more international. Um, I have a preference for neon, but I'm trying to think of why, and and I'm not sure. I think it might be this kind of international aspect, or just because they haven't been the it studio, independent studio. Maybe it's I like that they're not the big brand. Um, so yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
Great points. I agree with you. I feel like A24 is a bit more domestic leaning, American leaning than Neon, which is not afraid to acquire. It's one of its major upcoming releases, which will probably be an awards contender. Is this film? I don't want to get the name wrong. The Seed of the Sacred Fig by Iranian director Mohammad Rusaloff. So and good point about Robot Dreams being Spanish. I think you're right. I think that is definitely a leg up that Neon has. They're also, they've grown more slowly. I don't know what the relative founding dates of the companies are. I remember that Moonlight came out just as we were getting our film finance department started. We were actually talking to that development executive there at the time, as that being a really big deal for them, that they were had financed this film and were releasing it, and that was around 2015. Neon feels like it came onto the scene slightly later, though I'd have to check that. But just to look at the pace of their growth, Neon sits with something like 130 past titles. A24, by comparison, has something like 528. No, past titles, 207 past titles with 50 previous television titles. So A24, has hundreds of titles, maybe four times more than Neon. And I don't know, maybe that makes Neon's films a bit more memorable. Another case study for reference as it intersects with the Slated community here is that Neon actually partnered to finance and release a film called It Lives Inside, which is a horror film from a first-time feature writer-director named Bishal Dutta. And he was a longtime Slated story analyst, reviewed countless projects for us and for the community, thousands. I don't know how many, if it was over 1,500 or over 1,000, thousands for something like 6 or 7 years while he was developing his writing and directing career, and then just had hit after hit in terms of his writing career and his directing work. This was his first feature, and I can't speak for him, but I think I can share that he was really pleased with the partnership with Neon and really excited for the release that they gave that film. And I think at the time it was Neon's, if not their biggest opening, maybe their best performing horror film, something like that. So it did really well, and it's a perfect example of someone we know whose work was avant-garde, interesting. It was a voice that definitely needed to be heard, and Neon came in and supported really launching their career as a feature director from the development stage. They partnered on that. So that's one sort of personal example in our network of a really, really talented director and storyteller whose work was supported by Neon, and I think the kinds of things that they're hopefully going to become known for doing. So hopefully more of that with this $200 million expansion. I'm going to, first of all, any other comments on that? Maybe Mitchell, anything else that we should touch upon? Anything else to add? I haven't come to you in a while before we move on to the next topic.
No, I've just been sitting back and enjoying the conversation. Yeah, we have done a really good job outlining kind of both companies' ethoses. And yeah, like if anybody in the room has any other comments, contributions, or questions, please feel free to ask. But other than that, I think we're good to move on to the next topic.
Excellent. Okay, and before we do, we're lucky to have already someone on stage in our frequent contributor, Will. Will, did you want to add something to this conversation? Are you a Neon or A24 fan? Do you have a preference? Is any of this interesting to you so far? Anything to add before we evolve the conversation?
I look at A24. First off, hello everyone. How's your week? Happy
Hello.
Thanksgiving from Canada. Um, I kind of look at it again, as many knows, as you pointed out, being a frequent a contributor to this room, coming as a '90s kid, I'm going to go back to that one more reference when Seattle came out, like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, like the two big horses out of that world. And I remember people, which one you like? You more into punk, you're Nirvana. You're more into more mainstream rock sound. That was Pearl Jam. But I loved each band the same way, and that's kind of how I see A24 Neon. Um, because you got to look at an independent studio. What the more independent studios there are who are functioning like A24 Neon is good for everybody. And you look, and of course, film like music has those shifts where like David Fincher pointed out, the weekend after it was such a huge hit, there's probably studio executives asking, okay, everyone, where's our clown scripts? Where's our scripts about clowns? And from what I really like about Neon A24, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is the variety. They're not kind of doing the Blumhouse thing. Okay, we're doing high concept, but it's high concept horror. So we're kind of in this niche. They seem to be both this mandate. We don't care what the movie is, the genre, as long as it's not porn. If it's a good story that we feel connects with a first time filmmaker who we're confident in, we're going to do it. And that's really encouraging with A24 Neon again. But kind of my question on that, Greg, is because I've been looking for it, and maybe I'm missing some because I'm a little behind on my weekly reading. That was there anything a deep anywhere else a really deep dive of what Neon really plans to do with his $200 million? Someone said to me that they would not be surprised if the back of their head Neon actually goes on their own and does like a streaming site, their own streaming site to build off that brand. I thought that was an interesting comment or prediction, more to the point. Um, so I'll ask that you guys, is there any more deeper dive from what we've seen out there of what they plan to do with this $200 million?
That's a great question. I don't have any intel on that. I mean, in the press release, they listed everything. They didn't list a streaming service, but they mentioned, acquisition, development, and production. So, I think there's 200 million. It sounds like a lot, but it could be one movie. If you look at like how much a studio is spent, Warner spends on some of their franchises. So um, I think that they'll still have to be judicious with how they spend it. My guess is that they won't build a streaming platform because what we've observed over the last 5 or 6 years from the streaming wars is that these companies had to spend multiple billions of dollars really before their streaming platforms broke even, which they only just did for most of those companies. Paramount, Warner's Discovery, I think only just broke even in the last couple of quarters. So my guess is that they'll try to be really judicious and show their investors a return on investment. I'm sure they would like to bring home an Oscar with Honora this year or Sacred Fig. I think they would also like to have a couple more long legs type performers in the beginning of next year. That's my guess.
Cool.
So, okay, great. And now let's take a glance back at some of the A24 movies just to refresh your memory. It used to be that when you said A24, everybody thought of the same films, and I don't know that that's true anymore. They had, Past Lives, they had Everything Everywhere All at Once. They had You Hurt My Feelings, Beau is Afraid. And then films, The Whale, films like Janet Planet, which I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's a great film, but lesser. Many films like it, which are just not as well known. Um, and to your point, Will, I think that it is really helpful to the film industry and film community at large. And that's really to have players like Neon and A24 making movies, acquiring movies, releasing movies. That's really evident when you look at the box office. We're coming up on less than 30 days before the end of the year here, and you can see that when you look at the highest performers in terms of box office, they're almost all studio movies. So as we stand here today on the 3rd of December, the best performing film is Inside Out 2 with $653 million. Deadpool and Wolverine, 600. That was, of course, Inside Out 2, Walt Disney Studios. Deadpool and Wolverine, also from Disney, at $638 million. Despicable Me 4, $361 million from Universal. Beetlejuice from Warner's at $294 million is in number 4. Number 5 is Dune Part 2 from Warner's And then it's Twisters from Universal, Wicked from Universal, Moana 2, which just broke all of the Thanksgiving weekend box office records and is at $225 million, which I think it's less than a week into its opening. Also from Disney, Godzilla vs. Kong, Warner's, Kung Fu Panda 4, Universal, Bad Boys, Ride or Die, Sony. You have to go all the way down to Longlegs before you see a non major studio player. Effectively, before you see a non telecommunications company on the board, you go down to Longlegs, which is the Neon movie that we've discussed here, and that came in at $74 million. Below that, sorry, that is at slot number 26. So 26th highest grossing film of the year, with the 25 films above it all being major studio films. And then a few spots down from that, we have A24, which released Civil War. So I think that is very, very telling. And to Will's point, it's evidence that we need more mini majors that are making interesting films. I don't know that they'll, that a $5 million or a $10 million movie is ever going to bring in, $652 million in grosses. Of course, it's all relative to the budget. But clearly, we want more long legs out there. We want more Civil Wars, and we want more. If you look at even Focus Features, I don't know if anyone saw Conclave. Obviously, Focus is owned by NBCU, but an incredible film. The Iron Claw also came in from A24 this year. The Substance from Mubi down at number 74. So these are interesting films. I feel like some of them are the most talked about films. Did anyone see The Conclave or The Substance? Any fans of those films out there? And do you feel like they offered something different, or did films like them offer something different than you would have gotten from Inside Out 2? And I'll actually expand the question to say, did anyone see any of the major contributors to box office that I mentioned? Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, Despicable Me 4, Beetlejuice, Dune 2, Twisters, Wicked, Moana 2, Godzilla vs. Kong, Ride or Die. Did you see any of those films? Do you feel like the Neon A24 contributors, the more indie contributors, like, where do they sit? Are you, do you have a preference? Does one last in the memory a bit longer? I'll open that up to the whole room here.
Um, all right, going down that, starting with the independents. You mentioned The Substance there, Greg.
I did, yes. Did you see it? Do you like it?
Yeah, the Demi Moore film, please. Is that
That's
correct?
right.
Yeah, and I found that even though it was its own sense of twisted, and I watched it with someone who loves their horror films and all that, but not a film like we are. Doesn't work, you know. I call her civilian. She's my civilian. Um, from the madness that we exist in. Uh, but from I thought it was cool because there's Debbie Moore, obviously a known huge star, kind of turning into a role that in a lot of ways she's designed for, which makes sense. And what I'm getting at is, because I remember this quote, I can't remember who said it, and I should have, and I feel apologetic that a really respected actress. And what I'm getting here, very quickly, is as women get older in Hollywood, there's not as many good roles for older, more mature women in Hollywood, and this is going back to more of a studio system. And what I really liked about Substance, how it kind of found a way where maybe younger independent filmmaker can go to a proven star who maybe the Hollywood system has put out to pasture. I know it sounds sexist, but there's a lot of truth to that. And I will defend that. I will die on that hill. And maybe we can do something interesting that kind of interesting together, but also it's still Debbie Moore. She still carries a name. People, when you're flipping through on your VOD, new movie with Debbie Moore. Hey, I loved Ghost. I'll give that a shot, even though they have no idea what they're getting in for. In that regards, but also Deadpool, Wolverine. That's fun. Like at the end of the day, you still want to have fun with that. And I still love the studio films like Deadpool, Wolverine for that reasoning alone. And Inside Out too. My civilian has a 6-year-old, so that's something I can do with them, and I enjoy that experience. So overall, all these films have a purpose, and sometimes I know, Greg, you lift out the box office numbers like football scores in Las Vegas. I get it from the business point of view, I really do, but in some ways, I kind of try to remove that from the equation of what a particular film is, what its purpose is, its audience, and really how it just my own experience and what I can do with it. i.e., like I said, Inside Out 2, I've now seen 4 or 5 times because my civilian has a 6 year old. Um, Never thought I'd be down that path, but still, I'm enjoying that experience as
Yep.
much as I enjoy moving out with her watching The Substance, or just us, maybe having too much to drink and watching Deadpool and Wolverine. It all kind of comes together. I know maybe
That
seem a little Tarantino-esque romantic. I don't know if that was what you're looking for, but
it is. Yeah, no, I mean that's such a great point, Will. These films serve different purposes. They're not necessarily direct competitors to one another. And I don't know, Deadpool and Wolverine is maybe you're looking for fast food or dessert, whereas something else you may be Conclave, you may be looking to be more challenged. Maybe that's more sort of a sophisticated or a healthier meal, could you might say. So I get that. I get that. And I think you're right. I don't think box office is really the perfect, certainly not the singular metric by which these films' success should be compared. I'm curious, Mitchell, Chelsea, Chris, did you guys see any of these other sort of major headliners in the box office, and do you feel like they offered something different to you? Do you like Deadpool and Wolverine as much as you like Conclave or Longlegs or Babes, or do you feel like it's offering you something different that you like equally? Or I'd love to hear from you guys, not just your favorite indies, but what were your favorite sort of popcorn movies this year?
It's funny because I feel like I think, working in this business, we are all movie lovers. And so we all probably watch more movies than the average person. Um, and there are just a lot of studio films that I want to see. And it's funny because sometimes I don't even necessarily think, I know that it's not going to become my favorite film. I know it's not going to be my favorite film of the year, even, but you kind of just want to watch it because partially because sometimes the filmmaker is just pretty legendary and you just want to see what they come up with, but because it is sort of spectacle, they're pouring so much money into these and you kind of just want to see what they can accomplish. And I think sometimes it's actually really fun and cool to see because when they are successful, and other times they're more disappointing, but still worth seeing just to be sort of informed and aware and part of the cultural conversation. So last week me and Chris were talking about Wicked, which we both really loved, and I also saw Gladiator 2, so I participated in Glicked. What else have I seen that I enjoyed? Both of those I enjoyed. I think I probably liked Wicked more. But Gladiator, I think, you know, the Denzel performance alone, I think, is worth seeing Gladiator 2 for. But those are the two big ones that I can think in recent memory anyway.
Wow, you participated in Glicked. I didn't know what it didn't strike me the same way that Barbenheimer did when I saw it reported. I'm like, what is Glicked? Box office Glick. I'm like, this is terrible. It could have been uh, Wikiator. I'm not going to do better, but I didn't love Glicked. Anyway, I'm glad you did. I will participate. I haven't done Wicked yet, but I saw Gladiator 2, and it's a perfect example. It's only with a $250 million, or put another way, a $250 million Ridley Scott movie, are you going to be transported to ancient Rome in that way? Okay, Neon is not likely to give you that kind of experience, even with the advancements in AI. Ridley Scott shoots with 8 to 12 cameras at the same time. He's doing his close up and his wide shot simultaneously. He rebuilt the Coliseum. When they had to pause for filming during the strikes and during it was COVID or the strikes or just the strikes, I don't remember, but they had to rebuild certain blocks of that Coliseum, repaint it, and then re-age it. That's where the $250 million goes in that film, and you can attract actors like Denzel Washington, who of which there is only one to play really what I think is like a role unlike he's ever played before, never played before. To your point, Chelsea. So yeah, I mean, I think you guys are really I think you are perfectly assessing this, which is that they are totally different products. There's fun to be had at Gladiator 2, and there's fun to be had at Enora, and they're just going to challenge the mind or delight the mind in very different ways. And to anyone who hasn't seen Gladiator 2, I've heard it has mixed reviews, but I cannot for the life of me understand what people were expecting from this. It seemed to me to check all the boxes of a sequel to a movie that came out, over a decade ago and whose demographic is a little unclear to me. But I think for anybody who wants to be transported to ancient Rome and see some of the finest, today's finest actors pick up these roles and these archetypes, just to give the Denzel character as an example, he plays a character called Macrinus, who is basically a billionaire in ancient Roman times and is able to disrupt Roman politics because of his wealth and influence. But he began as a slave who earned his freedom fighting in the Colosseum. So it's a he's a fascinating character. He plays it brilliantly, to Chelsea's point, and it's not the kind of thing that an indie company is really set up to do. And I don't know, without spending $250 million, you don't get Ridley Scott. You don't get 10 simultaneous cinema cameras rolling in at a given time. You don't get a practically built Rome, So there's a place for that. I think you guys make really good points. It's not just about, you know, um, being difficult on the studio films and lifting up the indies. It's really that we want both to be represented in the marketplace. Mitchell, Chris, are there any popcorn movies that you really enjoyed? Did you see Wicked? Did you see any films this year that you feel like, yeah, this has a place for me? It was as good or better than my favorite indie film of the year.
Yeah, I did end up seeing Wicked and Gladiator too, and I like both of them. But yeah, if we're talking about kind of studio films that are personally on my best of list, Dune Part Two was earlier this year, um, and I really really loved that. Uh, Inside Out 2 as well was really great kind of exploration of anxiety in particular. The Wild Robot, uh, continuing with the animated streak, was also really fantastic. And yeah, it's just these other films, they definitely have a little bit of that studio kind of quality in them, but I think that there's still some real art to be had in there, as well, just beyond kind of the popcorn sentimentality. There's some really great stuff that's happening with these sorts of auteur filmmakers and kind of animation studios. They're doing some really great work.
Excellent. Agree with all of that. Chris, any popcorn movies that you're going to place your seal of approval on this year?
Well, I enjoyed Twisters. I believe Chelsea did too because I think we talked about that when it came out. Um, I also liked Inside Out 2. I watched Wicked. I watched The Substance, which I enjoy. I am very much not a horror or body horror fan at all. So, um, like, that's a lot for me to enjoy that film. um, and what else did you talk? I watched Wicked. I still heard, but um, I mean, going to the cinema is cheaper here. I don't know if I were paying US prices if I would go see these blockbusters. I mean, there's definitely something to be said for the spectacle that these bigger budget studio films provide that is just really fun, and the sound. Go to a movie theater with good sound. All of that is just really fun. Yeah, but if it were more expensive, I don't know if I would be spending the money on them. I would definitely favor the indies. Um, and I haven't. What was I can't remember. But yes, definitely indies forever. In the movie theater will always be my preference,
That
except
is
for musicals. Musicals
okay. There's a caveat there. All right.
out.
No, I think I feel the same way, Chris. I think if I had to see a movie in theaters, I would choose more of an Anora type film or a Conclave type film than I would Gladiator 2. And I don't know why that is, except I think that just seeing an indie in theaters can be so transporting in a way that it isn't at home. And maybe that's because independent filmmakers, the true auteurs that are driving that today, they spend so much time on every detail, on every frame, on every on the sound engineering and all of that, that it just seems like to not see past lives in theaters is to miss something. Whereas Madam Web, maybe I'm using a bad example, or Argyle, these are big visual spectacles, but I feel like you're getting most of what you need to get on your flat screen at home. Challengers, I saw that in theaters and was really happy that I did. I think it's a really good point, Chris. I think people think of like, oh, you got to see the next Marvel movie. That's a must see in theaters. And for maybe it's this group, maybe it's this room. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear from you all, if in the comments section, or for anyone who'd like to raise their hand. When you're seeing a movie in theaters, if you're going to spend the $15, would you favor a big box office spectacle, or would you favor a movie more like Long Legs, or Challengers, uh, or Past Lives? What do you guys think? I saw Deadpool and Wolverine on a plane, and I loved it. And I feel like that was the perfect way to see Deadpool and Wolverine. But maybe to some folks out there, that's sacrilegious. Any other comments on this stuff? We have before we move on. I'll say we have about 15 minutes, 12 or 15 minutes left in the conversation, unless we go a bit long. So a reminder to the room: this is Slated's weekly film finance Q&A. We're here every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific. We talk for around an hour about everything related to getting movies made and the film industry at large, and the issues and goals of our film community over at Slated.com. If you haven't joined, click the link at the top of the room, get at Slated.com to become a member of our community for free. We're about to cross 80,000 members. Please help us get there. Refer us to friends. You join if you haven't signed up yet. But let's try to make sure we get to 80,000 members before the end of the year. Actually, it's going to be a mad dash. I think we have a few hundred left to go over the next 30 days, and you can help us get there. So join Slated if you haven't already. But most importantly, if you're enjoying this conversation and you'd like to participate, you can raise your hand right now, and we'll call you up on stage in the final few minutes here. Or if you don't want to come up on stage and wait to be called on, or you're not in a position to speak on mic, you can maybe write your question in the comments section, and we'll try to address that before we wrap up. So yeah, I think we've covered a lot so far. I will say one other player to consider, and it's probably worth its own clubhouse session here, is Lionsgate. Lionsgate has long been considered, one of the sort of mini major to speak of, and they're it's interesting to see how their brand has evolved. I mean, obviously they're known for the Hunger Games and John Wick, and they just did this major deal with the AI company Runway to train on their entire library of images and video. Who knows what that's going to end up producing? But if you look at what they put up on the board theatrically, they are a company that has been around a long time. They still exist ostensibly because they are profitable. That's the only way that an independent outfit that is not owned by a telecommunications company gets to continue existing. They really are very thoughtful about the types of movies that they make, the budgets that they make them in, the package and talent that they're putting together, whether each dollar spent is going to recoup a dollar from the market and what the market's saying. And maybe you could say that the result of that is that they're the opposite of A24 in terms of their brand. They do have some awards movies, but for the most part, it's sort of all over the board. So if you look at the first time they make an appearance on the board in 2024 for box office, we have The Strangers Chapter 1 with 35 million. That was the 43rd highest grossing film of the year. And just a few slots behind that is The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, which I didn't see. Imaginary, a few below that. Arthur the King. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which I did not see. You have to get down to, they did Borderlands, which I think is based on a video game. Never Let Go, The Crow, which was a reboot or a sequel to The Crow. You get down to 105 for The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, that did $6.5 million, $6.6 million. So it's it's hard to piece together what is the story here. They did a movie called 1992, which is maybe from the marketing I saw, one of the more indie leaning films of the ones I just mentioned. So they're leaning into action and family and holiday films and franchise films, but I don't know, what is that? Does it dilute the brand? Does it matter? I think they've done a good job of proving they have staying power, and they'll do whatever they have to do to make a movie that's going to serve an audience that'll come out to see it and recoup that film's budget. So I don't know. I mean, is this a model of what's to come for A24 when A24 reaches maturity in 10 years or 15 years? Are they going to be a little bit more sporadic and a little bit more commercially driven, a little bit more internationally driven? Who knows? But I think it's interesting to look at a mature player like Lionsgate, who's cut their own path through through the field and done okay at it, even if their brand isn't the new cool kid on the block that A24 is. Any Lionsgate fans out there? Probably not. Any? Are you a John Wick fan or Hunger Games fans? Anyone who wants to defend Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes in this room, or am I speaking to the wrong audience? Chelsea, Mitchell, Chris, Will.
Well, being Canadian, we cheer for Lionsgate since they started in Vancouver. Little hometown pride
Excellent.
there. Yeah, in the sense, but you look at Lionsgate's evolution because they've been bought and sold a couple times now. Correct me if I'm wrong. Um, and you think, and I think back to your initial, I'm a Lionsgate fan. Yeah, I'm a fan of any studio that makes films. At the end of the day, and when you look at a studio's evolution, it's like a business's evolution. You look, will a bigger studio kind of swallow this studio up because they like what they're doing? And then, a new CEO comes in and looks at the market and says, no, the indie films aren't working for us. We need a tentpole here. We need 600 million at the box office to, keep the investors at bay. And that again comes back to the complex world of what we do, because the problem with the business of film is that it's an art, and the problem with the art of film is that it's a business. And Lionsgate, for me, just taking a step back, kind of properly represents that. Started this feisty little studio that we all dreamed about or heard about, Canadian. That's where he wanted to go, out of Vancouver, and the way they grew, and then they get bought out by a bigger company and evolve into the John Wicks of the world and the Hunger Games. As a battle royale guy, I don't watch the Hunger Games just for that reason alone. Um, but yeah, I still cheer for them because they are out there trying to make films and making films, and they will maybe take a chance on the indie filmmaker once in a while, or i.e., will give the indie filmmaker the bigger job. I don't know, John Wick 6. John, let's say, again, back to you earlier, we talked about Tangerine on the iPhone. Someone makes a very cool action film for 100 grand on an iPhone, and then Lionsgate looks at that and says, okay, that's our guy or girl to do John Wick 6 or a more tentpole action film. And because I think Lionsgate would have that, because you look at, I don't think, again, John Wick's directors didn't have the long resume. Um, and they still seem to have that indie attitude, unless I'm missing something. No, actually, no, I'm going to be confident in that statement. They still have that indie attitude to them.
Excellent. Yeah, I didn't know the Canadian connection. That's very cool. But you're correct. They've been around a while, and mostly they've been on the acquiring side. Most recently, they acquired Entertainment One, which was another Canadian major player there. And it's interesting. They are advocates for artists sometimes in unexpected ways. They released Megalopolis, which uh, was supposed to have $120 million production budget, and from what I've heard, although I haven't verified, I wouldn't have a way of verifying it. Francis Ford Coppola, the director of Megalopolis, spent his own money making that film. Not so different from Kevin Costner and Horizon. Studios said to these folks, we're not going to finance the production of these movies. And Francis Ford Coppola said, you know what, I did The Godfather and nobody believed me then, and I'm going to double down here. Obviously, he has wealth from his winery and other businesses, so he put $120 million, as the story goes, into Megalopolis. Lionsgate came along to release it. Ostensibly, that means they spent the print and advertising budget to market the film. I have no idea how much that was, but it was not less than tens of millions of dollars, because there were posters and interviews everywhere for that film. And that film returned just $13.8 million at the worldwide box office, and largely because the reviews were so unfavorable for it. So, I mean, it gets to this sort of point in the conversation of number one, Lionsgate is still betting it on auteurs, even if they're veteran auteurs that maybe don't need the help, or in this case, maybe they did. They probably took a loss on Megalopolis. But it was maybe worth their, having it as a library title because people are going to watch Francis Ford Coppola movies till Kingdom Come for the next several decades. But it's also an example of, the quality matter of the film mattering more today than ever before. Because the film didn't receive favorable reviews, nobody saw it. The same was true of Joker 2. And maybe it's sort of Chris sort of alluded that Sean Baker may have this problem of, yes, an auteur, but you're quite insular. From whom are you getting really truly challenging feedback that says, hey, we're not there yet? Maybe Sean Baker didn't need it. He'll probably be nominated for an Oscar. Certainly Francis Ford Coppola may have needed it. And it gets to this point of feedback from people you trust, from people who know what they're doing, being really, really, really important, whether at the script stage or the screening stage. And that's one of the things that we're most proud of at Slated, for all the matchmaking with investors and distributing of great films, that you can come to Slated, you can list your film in confidence, keep your film page private and confidential, and get confidential feedback on your script from people who will be the next Bishel Dutta, the next big breakout neon film director like It Lives Inside, are going to be giving you that feedback in a way that's constructive and positive and helps you make the material better, so that, hey, if Neon does come along and acquire a movie and releases it, your word of mouth and critical reviews are going to be the wind beneath your wings and not the thing that keeps folks from seeing the movie and having it be a success on streaming and transactional and AVOD and everything else. So, that's my sort of soft, sell to getting feedback, whether you get it with us or someone else you trust. I think it's critically important to establishing your career and making sure that you are successful on this project and beyond. We are getting to the top of the hour, and I've been talking for the last couple minutes, so I want to circle back to Mitchell and Chelsea and Chris as well. Did you guys, any comments on any of this? Are you going to defend Megalopolis or Horizon, I think it was called? Did you see those movies? Did anybody in the room see Megalopolis or Horizon? Please let me know.
Noah Meganopolis saw Horizon.
And
I loved Horizon actually. The concept, the epic western, maybe is something I grew up with. I really, really enjoyed what Costner was trying to do. Um, it was definitely a theater film, just the way it was shot with the bigger like the widescreen. Obviously, a lot of 70 millimeter lenses in that landscape area, which looked fantastic on the big screen and really kind of punched.
excellent. Well, there's something to be said about letting somebody like Costner, or giving him the opportunity, or he gave himself the opportunity in this case, who has seen this business from every angle, express his love for cinema through a story that I think is personal to him on some level, though I haven't done a deep dive. Chelsea, Mitchell, Chris, have you guys seen Horizon or Megalopolis? Do you have anything else to add to this end of the conversation?
I have not seen Horizon, Megalopolis, and I will say uh, it was one of my favorite theatrical experiences of the year. Definitely not one of my favorite movies of the year, but I would highly recommend getting together with a group of friends and watching it because it goes crazy, and it is a very, very fun time.
Oh, that's great to hear. So maybe this is a case where its sort of cult following will be a bit delayed. I don't know if that was true for the first Godfather, but he goes all in, it sounds like, and there is a certain novelty at a minimum to that, if not entertainment value. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't think I'm enjoying it in the same way that Francis Ford Coppola intended for people to enjoy it, just to say it delicately. But I think that I would highly recommend. Again, if you're seeing it on your own, I don't think you're gonna. I don't think that's the intended. That's the best way to see it. But with a group of friends, kind of knowing that it's this really crazy singular vision of a person who I don't think has had anyone say no to him on a creative level for the film. Um, it's it's unlike anything else that I've seen in quite a few years.
Fantastic. Well, Mitchell, I know you would never use the phrase hate watch. You're too nice for that, so I won't put those words in your mouth, but I understand the implication. Um, Chris and Chelsea, anything to add as we wrap up this conversation here about the big box office bombs? Were they worth it? You know, they put those filmmakers both self-funded those major projects, so they earned it. Is the market better for having films like this in it? Did you see either of those films? Any final comments on any of this before we start to wrap up?
I haven't seen either of those films, but I do want to see Megalopolis. And I've heard, very similar comments about what it will be like. But I am excited to see it, just to see it for myself, I suppose. But I think also what Mitchell, what you're saying, it really does speak to the like why I feel like it's still special to see a film in theaters alongside an audience. And it's not only just for these like really big spectacle films either, because I recently saw Clint Eastwood's new movie, Juror Number Three, in a theater. And I thought that the audience response to it is just so interesting and unexpected. And I also saw Blue Velvet recently in a theater. Same thing, like the audience kind of response to specific scenes are just so interesting to see and hear. And yeah, it reminds me of why enjoy going to the movies. It's not necessarily to see a movie on a really big screen, although sometimes that is the case. But sometimes it's nice just to be in a group and be alongside fellow viewers to see what their response is, and that's part of the fun as well.
Well said, and props to you for seeing Juror Number Two. That movie is potentially Clint Eastwood's last. He's 94 or 95 years old, and he's another, not older, obviously more statesman-like than Coppola or Costner, but another example, much more so auteur director who's done many, many movies, and in this case, Warner's Discovery kind of shelved the project. I mean, they gave it a tiny release. It was supposed to get a broad release. It's in a handful of theaters, really hard to find. And I'm sure Mr. Eastwood appreciates that you sought this movie out, Chelsea, because the reviews, people seem to like the movie, even though Warner's, for whatever reason, decided that they weren't going to give it any love in its release. So yet another occupational hazard of doing business with Charter Communications and the like, yeah, Comcast and the like, I should say. So, yeah, any final comments from you, Chris, about these particular, yeah, more veteran filmmakers and the types of films they're putting out?
And I probably won't. Um, if I don't catch these kind of movies in the theater, I I just it's very unlikely I will watch them, even though I watch plenty of bad movies on streaming, but not this kind of movie. The last movie I saw was the Almodovar one by a veteran filmmaker, and it was a pretty rough viewing. I was kind of sighing all the way through. And it's interesting because a big part of it was just feeling predictable as per his own style. So, I mean, I'm glad I went to see it, and there were things I liked about the film, but I was wondering, I wonder if audiences who haven't seen any of his films, how they'll react. My reaction is It just feels very heavy-handed and like he's just repeating themes and styles and pacing from his other films that feels cliche is a strong word, but cliche even though he came up with it, like remaining true to his style, but because he's made so many films, it feels like his own trope. So I find that interesting. I feel like I would probably, yeah, I'm never gonna watch Megalopolis. I'm too interested in new and different voices, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna dedicate time to that or like really dumb, funny movies.
Yeah. Well, that's a very, very fair point. I tend to agree, and it's interesting. With Almodovar, he's sort of playing the greatest hits, rehashing his own style. At least it can be said that Francis Ford Coppola tried something different with Megalopolis. At least from what I saw from the trailers. I'm probably going to misparaphrase this, but I saw like a press junket interview with Aubrey Plaza where she was like, I still don't really know what the movie's about, or said something like that. Like she read the script and she had no idea what the movie was about. And I think that's probably speaks to the experience that Mitchell was describing. And where we stand today is that um, Scorsese got The Irishman, such a long film, and got to make it exactly the way he wanted. And now Coppola self-financed Megalopolis and Costner Horizon, and this recent Almodovar film. I long for the days. Hopefully, it will be soon when we have such a veteran, established female director. Maybe it will be Greta Gerwig, who does something, who just retrenches whatever she loves doing and spends way too much doing it, and has a bomb, of outsized proportions that we would only ever hate watch. And a studio picks it up because she's Greta Gerwig. Hopefully, that will be coming when she's in the same sort of veteran class in her 70s or 80s. We can only hope. As for now, she has to keep turning out hit after hit after hit. I think every movie she's done is not just certified fresh, but it's been nominated for Oscars. Is that yes, Chris?
But
Oh, I
but
missed the first part. I missed the first part
I
before the
hate
laugh.
I hate watched Little Women, but I love the point that you're making, and I look forward to that day as well.
Wonderful. Yes, Chelsea.
Chris, I cannot believe you did not like Little Women.
I think it's the case of just loving Gillian Armstrong's 93 or
That's
91
fair. I love that
version,
one as well.
um, and loving Gillian Armstrong. Like if Gillian modern filmmaker now, she could put a movie
Yeah.
out there that would be kind of in the same category. She's a bit yet, but close.
Well, very, very taste in this room, and that's what independent film is all about. And yes, we can all hope that we're helping here at Slated to mint more Greta Gerwigs of today, and hopefully more, female versions of Francis Ford Coppola of tomorrow. That's what you can do to contribute to our mission here at Slated. We're the only virtual film studio, and we're about to cross 80,000 members, and we would be so grateful if you haven't joined the community yet. If you could be one of those critically important members to help us cross 80,000 before the end of the year. So please go ahead and sign up if you haven't already. And if you have already signed up and you enjoy these conversations, do us the favor of sharing the slated.com link or the get.slated.com link, whichever you prefer. It all directs to the same place, with someone that you like, that you think likes film and filmmaking. Maybe they have a project that they'd like to get off the ground. Again, we're the only virtual film studio where you can list that project and you can be matching in some cases with thousands of collaborators and investors on your film page by just subscribing for $30 a month. Or you don't have to pay anything and you can just reach out to other people's films and collaborate that way. So please help us spread the love and build up the independent film community as much as we can by letting people know about Slated. Before we wrap up, I want to give some love to some comments in the comment section from Peter. Peter says that he had the pleasure of hanging out with Sean Baker one evening and he was super nice and very humble. That's great to know. Also, Peter loved Conclave. but not so much for the greatest Christmas pageant. So score a 1 for indie film on the Conclave, A24, I think we said that was, and mark against Lionsgate's money-making machine with the Christmas pageant. Thank you so much to everybody who contributed for this hour. It was a really fun discussion. I want to thank Chris and Chelsea and Mitchell and our recurring contributor, Will. Thank you so much for your contributions as well. And thank you especially to everybody who joined and listened and participated in the room here, to our Slated community. Again, follow us at the link at the top of the room, and we'll see you on the platform. We'll be here again next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, and so hopefully we'll see you then. And until then, have a wonderful week and best of luck with your projects. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Have a great week.